Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday, and this is my first proper LinkedIn live session after doing a little bit of a test run yesterday, and I'm super excited. So yeah, if you're with me, say hello. And yeah, one of the things I was going to do today is to talk to you about. Just going to make sure I am broadcasting live, first of all. Okay, yes, I'm live. Okay. So the first thing I want to do as my first broadcast session today is to go through my cold call optics framework. It's actually a session I did last week, in fact, on Jason Bay's Blissful Prospecting Tour. But I realized that I did that at 6 p.m., which for people in the UK probably didn't work that well. People might have been offline at that point. And so, yeah, I was keen to bring my cold call optics framework to LinkedIn Live. Really, the whole purpose of this framework is to help people understand how to become more effective at their cold calls. I think highlighting some of the common errors and mistakes I see people making with their cold calls, and a framework that I think really, when it's actually put into practice by salespeople, can lead to them having less objections, have more conversations with prospects, and ultimately have more success. And I think a lot of people the problem that they have with cold calls is just simply that people want to get better at them. People have anxieties over making cold calls, but they simply don't really know what to do about it. And hopefully this framework that I can bring to life to you will be really, really helpful. Now, before we start, if you think that there are any colleagues that you have who you think would be either A, have anxieties over cold calling, B, want to get better results cold calling, C, just simply think of some new ideas and fresh ideas and practical things, or D, just simply want to hear what a cold call sounds like in practice with yours truly, tag them in this LinkedIn post right now. Get them involved in this chat, because I'm going to be teaching this framework over the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, as well as actually backing it up by playing a real cold call example of me putting this framework into practice. And my commitment to you is that you and your colleagues at the end of this can hopefully have a framework that you can adapt to be useful for your own company and have more success. So tag in your colleagues into the post now. Anybody who you think would want to invest 20 minutes right now of getting better at cold calls, and they will. I'm sure they will get a lot of value from this. Super excited about this. This is the first proper one of these I've done, so excuse me if it's a little bit rusty. It's a little bit strange doing something in this way. Okay, right. So, cold calling optics. I'm going to share my screen first of all. So, let's have a look. Right. And I'm going to bank on the fact that you can now see my slides around where do most cold calls go wrong. Matt, if you can just Slack me right now and just tell me that you can see this, just because I can only see one tab. I can't actually see the LinkedIn tab now. So if you can see that, Matt. Okay, right. I'm going to bank on it that you can see my slides. Jacob Ison, tune. Right, okay. If you can see my slides, where do most cold calls go wrong? Just type yes. Type yes in the comments. Not yet. Right, I'm going to hold on this slide for a while. Maybe I need to reshare. Right, okay. I'm going to share a different window. How do I do this? Right, Matt's giving me some instructions here. This is the classic case of first round. Hang on. Okay, what about now? Matt, type yes if you can see it. Sharing this tab to restream, it tells me. So I'm thinking that I'm on the right path here. Spotlight. Here we go. Right. Maybe we do it now. Does this work? This is classic. Right. If you can see my slide, where do most cold calls go wrong? Let me know now. If not, I'm going to wing this just by doing it on camera. Right, okay. We're going to scrap the slides and I'm going to wing this. You're going to get the same value just with me talking. Okay. Right, so where do most cold calls go wrong? I think is the biggest starting point here. So one of the biggest problems that I see is that too many cold calls sound like a sales call. People on here are thinking, well, of course they do. Like, it's a cold call. Well, here's the thing. The problem with why we got objections from prospects is that every cold call that we make, or 95% of the calls that are being made right now, sound like a sales call no sooner than 5 seconds after the salesperson started talking. Because they all sound like this. Oh, hi there, this is Rich from Refract. Is this a good time? Is this a bad time? They all just sound like this. As soon as prospects hear the product pitch, everything goes wrong. You get objections like, send me some information. People ask for information when they don't understand what it is that they're actually hearing. Okay, I know that audio has been lost for some reason. Let me see. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'm back. Can everybody hear me? I'm back on. Hoping people can hear me okay. Let me know if you can. Hello. Can you hear me okay? Hello. Right, okay. Liam has tuned in. I think you can hear me, Liam. I'm having some big problems here with Restream, which is the product that we're using to stream this this file. Right. Okay. So, what I was saying is that the problem with most cold calls that they're a product pitch is that they sound. Salespeople want to tell their prospects all about their product. Do you think your prospects are sat there waiting for waiting for you to call about your platform or your service? People don't understand what products actually mean and sound like in a cold call. You need to remember that the person that you called was distracted at the point that you actually called them. Their focus was elsewhere. They were doing some other task, and suddenly you're expecting them to process when you actually tell them about your product and service in such a small window. And this is why we get the things like send me some information, or we've got something like that already, or I'm not interested, or we don't have budget for it. People give you these objections because they don't want to spend the time understanding and processing what it is that you're actually saying. The other reason that we get cold calls is that they're all about the salesperson. It's usually all about what you want. You want to get more time with the prospect. You want to book a demo. You want to get a meeting. Here's the thing. The reason why we get objections on cold calls is because the calls are all about the salesperson. They're not prospect-centric. We make things prospect-centric by asking them questions about themselves, about their company, about their world. And as soon as we talk about our products and what we want, prospects tune out. The other thing, just to finally wrap this piece up, is that too many people make a cold call because they have the desire and the intention to book a meeting. And I think if I ask most salespeople, why do you make cold calls? They always give me the same answer. It's to book a meeting. It's to book a demo. It's to get more time with the prospect. Again, this is heavily salesperson centric. The purpose of cold calling a prospect is not to book a meeting. It's to find people who you can help. It's to find prospects that have an indication of a problem that you help solve. So if you call prospects with the intention of booking a meeting, the problem is that if you don't book a meeting, you get despondent. You don't want to make the next call. You get rejected and you don't want to go again. But when you detach yourself from the outcome, if you simply go into making cold calls and think, actually, the only reason I'm going to make this cold call to this prospect is to find out if they have a problem that we can help solve. And if they say they don't, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Imagine if you went into cold calls not with the expectation of booking a meeting, but just thought, I'm only going to find people who we might be able to help. Do you think your confidence to make cold calls would go up if that was your intention? If you had that mentality, and if you think that if you would be more successful or have more confidence with that mentality, put in the comments yes. I want to hear from people who feel like they sometimes feel too attached to the outcome of the call. They put too much pressure on booking the meeting versus actually just finding out people that they can help. Okay. What I'm going to do next is move on to the cold call optics framework. And I believe that this framework, when utilized, can help you have more success when making cold calls. Because I think a lot of people don't actually have a structure or a framework or a process that they actually go through when they're making cold calls. They just kind of hope for the best. I'm just going to go on. I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to handle some objections, and, hopefully I'll get that meeting. If you have a process or a framework that you follow consistently when you cold call, I want you just to pop in the comments, say yes. If you don't, put no. And also, before I jump into the framework here, please type in some of the challenges that you find when you get prospects on the phone. What are the specific challenges you have when prospects answer the phone? What are the things that you struggle with? I really want to hear them, and I'll try and touch upon and answer some of these questions. Also, as I go through this framework, if you think that this framework would be useful for us to put in some kind of useful guide that you can start to apply your own company to, let us know in the comments, and Matt's in there too. And what we'll do, if we get enough interest, we'll actually create this framework as a really nice step-by-step guide that you guys can make use of, download, and use within your own conversations. There is a little bit of a lag of the comments coming through on the platform I'm using, so I'm not getting the questions straight away, but please keep them coming, and I'll try and touch upon any of these challenges and answer any questions as I go through this. Okay, so we're going to start with the optics framework, and the first part of the optics framework is the letter O, and the O is the opening. And why the opening is so key is if you get the opening right, then the rest of the conversation feels easier, because what I think one of the biggest challenges with cold calls is just feeling like we're going to be given the time to talk by our prospects. It's like if we knew that our prospects would give us some time to talk, everything just feels better. We feel more relaxed. We feel more at ease. But as I mentioned, the problem where sales calls go wrong is that they sound like a sales call. And so the opening doesn't work. We get that objection before we've even had the chance to really talk. So the key here is to try and make your calls sound different to what most cold calls sound like. And we do this by using various pattern interrupts. A pattern interrupt is something that you say that takes the prospect away from their normal course of thinking to be able to think, this is not a normal sales call. It almost makes them stop in their way and makes them invite you in. It removes the automatic tongue triggers that we get from prospects where they unleash the objection before you've even got started. And there's numerous pattern interrupts that you can use, and I'd say get creative. The one that we always find has been really effective for us at Refract, works more times than not, is we say, have you got 35 seconds so I can tell you why I've chosen to call you today? And let me break that down for you. 35 seconds is such a specific time selection. Doesn't feel like too much, doesn't feel too little, doesn't feel too common. It's not like we're asking for a minute or a few minutes or even a few moments. It's highly intentional 35 seconds. Now, when we do that, the other part of it is I'm saying to explain why I chose to call you today. I want you to think about the words that I'm using there to explain why I've chosen or why I've decided to call you today. When I say that, it makes it sound like this call is highly intentional. It makes it sound like I have specifically chosen that prospect to call. I'm not calling, a big long list of people and it's whoever picks the phone up first. It's highly specific why I've chosen to call you today or this afternoon or this morning. When you say those things, you make it more specific and you make the prospect think, this sounds important. So, hey, Anthony, good to see you too, mate. Think of that. Now, some of the things that we do here as well at Refract, and I shared this on the Jason Bayes tour last week, is oftentimes you can mix this up. And one of the other things that we use in our calls is we sell to sales professionals. We sell to VPs of sales. And so we say, hey, Mr. VP of sales, I appreciate I'm an interruption to your morning, but from one sales professional to another, do you have 35 seconds to explain why I've chosen to call you today? From one sales professional to another suddenly sounds, well, hang on, like this. You're putting yourself on their level. You're building up familiarity. You're making the person think you're kind of part of a tribe. And this doesn't just work with like sales professionals. Let's imagine you sell to manufacturing, or you sell to hospitality, or you sell to marketing or e-commerce. It still works. Hey, from one e-commerce professional to another, or hey, from one digital marketing professional to another. When you say those things, because that's what you are, even though you might think, well, I'm not a digital marketing professional, I'm a sales professional. You are a professional because you understand that role, or you should do, as much as anybody living in that world. If you don't, then maybe you need to learn more about the audience that you sell to. But when you say those things, it immediately kind of I almost sense it of like you're creating familiarity, you're creating trust, you're creating that tribe mentality of I'm one of you. And what often happens when you give these pattern interrupts is you hear this pause. The prospect gives a little pause because you've taken them off their normal course of action. They're not there to hit you with that objection, slap you with a, no, I'm going into a meeting right now. It sounds unusual. And when it sounds unusual, people start to think about it more. It doesn't sound like the normal. And when they start to think about it more, it becomes harder for them to give you their objections. And if I just play out, this is what it sounds like on one of my calls. I'll actually play this out, so hopefully you can hear this, everyone. This is what a normal pattern interrupt sounds like on a real cold call. So I'm actually going to play this to you, so hopefully you can hear this.
Hello, this is Kathy. How may I help you?
Oh, hey, Kathy. This is Rich calling from Refract. I appreciate it's Monday morning and you've probably got things to be getting on with, but can you give me 35 seconds to explain what I've called today?
Sure.
So you heard there is that it was almost like half a second to a second where the prospect, after I'd finished talking, it was like 35 seconds to explain why I've chose to call you today. Sure, it was that little bit of silence that you heard there was the prospect thinking, this sounds unusual. This sounds not like a normal sales call. And when you don't sound like a normal sales call, you get invited in by prospects to talk more. Okay, so that's the opening. We're going to go to P. So optics, second letter in optics is P. P is problems. And this is where the magic happens. Because again, if you remember when I go back to the problem where cold calls go wrong, one of the reasons that they become a product pitch. People feel like a cold call and an invitation to talk is an excuse to just dump their product and their features and benefits all over the prospect. When we do that, prospects tune out, they don't understand, it doesn't make sense, they're distracted. That's when you get hit with objections like, we're good right now, send me some information is probably a common one because it feels the logical thing to do. If a prospect doesn't understand what you're saying, the easy thing to do is ask for information because I don't have to deal with this right now. I can process it later when the salesperson sends me an email that I'm probably never going to read anyway. So instead, lead with problems. Lead with problems that you know that you help solve for that prospect because, again, the only objective of the cold call here is to find prospects that have a problem that you might be able to fix. And the way I do this is to, before you even make the call, write down on a piece of paper 2 highly specific, crispy problems that you know that prospect faces that they're trying to tackle. And what I don't mean here is, let's imagine I was selling at Refract. My prospects are not moaning and whinging about, oh man, I wish I had an artificial intelligence conversation analyzer. Like they're not thinking those things. That's not a problem. What they are saying, however, is, oh man, I'm super frustrated that I've got one salesperson who always converts more sales than anybody else in the team. And I just can't replicate that person. Or they are sometimes saying, oh man, I know that every day we're missing out on opportunities in our sales calls, but I just don't know how to solve that problem. I don't know how to reduce missed opportunities short of sitting, listening to tons of calls. That's how they're describing their problems. They're describing them in very simple terminology. So I want you to just write down specifically 2 problems that you solve for customers, that profile of customer, but I want you to think about how do they communicate those problems to their partner? When they go home on an evening and they've had a bad day and their husband, their wife, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, whoever it is, asks them, what's the matter? What's been frustrating today? What are the words that come out of their mouth? And for me, it probably is things like, we're just creating lots of leads, but we're just not converting as many as we would like, and I just don't know why. I'm under pressure. They're not saying, oh, I wish I could use artificial intelligence to analyze sales calls. That's not what they're saying. That's product centric. So this is what it sounds like when I'm using this in my actual call. So I'm going to play out the problems section of my cold call, and this is what it sounds like.
Kathy, I noticed that you run inside sales there at MicroBuild. I just want to share a couple of key challenges we've been solving for their inside sales leaders recently, and just want to see if either of these sound even remotely familiar in your world. The first one is that they know that they're losing deals in the sales calls that their guys are having every day, but the problem they're facing is that they don't have the capacity or time to be able to listen in on all of those calls, so it's very hard for them to find out, where those deals are slipping. Others tell me that they typically have 2 or 3 real top performers who have better conversions, deliver better results consistently. They know those guys do things differently in their sales calls, but they don't have any way to really share what those guys do differently in their sales conversations to others on the team. Do either of those sound familiar in your?
So you heard there the 2 specific problems that I mentioned there. I haven't mentioned about Refract. I haven't mentioned about my product. I haven't mentioned any features and benefits. I'm simply saying we solve these 2 problems, or I speak with people in your role, and these are the problems that I'm talking about. And what happens is when you talk about those problems and you say things like, do either of those things sound even familiar in your world, then this is what you're looking for. You're looking for a yes or a no. And this is what happens in this call.
Well, Kathy?
Yes, they do.
I've got the prospect say, yes, what you've just said there sounds familiar. I'm not asking the prospect, are these the biggest problems in your world right now? And is my cold call today save the day? Because guess what? If I did that, prospects are going to back away. They're going to push me away. All I'm doing is, hey, does any of this, what I'm saying, just sound familiar? And I often get asked the question, what happens if they say no? Well, if they say no, it's actually a really good thing, because I can ask them the question, sounds like you're one of the lucky ones. Tell me, how are you solving that today? And oftentimes when I do that, the prospect tells me basically a process of things that I can pick apart. Or they tell me what they think is the right way to be solving this problem, but actually they just don't know that there's a better solution. If they say no, it's a good thing, because above anything else, I'm getting the prospect to open up and tell me more about their situation. Now, if they say yes, those problems sound similar, what I want to do next is get the prospect to get more selective, more specific. I want them to tell me, okay, help me understand a bit more of what I've just shared. What bit resonated the most? And the best way to do this is to get them to select which option A, problem B, resonated the most. And this is the T part of the optics framework. It's the think, T for think. And this is what it sounds like.
And of those 2, kind of having that visibility into sales calls at scale, or just sharing what your top guys do differently, which of those particularly stands out to you the most?
I would say they do differently for the most part.
So there you had it. The prospect selected option B, which is a winner for me. So you've got like the prospect of to tell me, of those 2 problems that you mentioned, both of them sound familiar, but actually it's this one which sounds the most interesting. And getting the prospect to think and visualize this problem a bit more. So what I've not done here is, and the prospect has not told me this is a massive problem. It's just that this sounds like something of interest. Remember, yet in the call, and I'm 2.5 minutes into the call, I actually haven't mentioned my product yet. No mention of what my product is or does. Brings me on to the I of optics, which is the impact. So I've got them to select the option. I want them to start thinking more specifically of that specific problem. And the I stands for imagine. I want them to. I've got the prospect to say, yes, this problem sounds familiar, but I want them to start to visualize really the reality of that problem. Remember, this prospect didn't have a clue who I was 3 minutes ago. They didn't know who Richard Smith were. They didn't know who Refract were. But I've got to get them from A to B and start to think about this problem in more in more detail. And the way I achieve this is by getting the prospect to give me an example in their real world of where they've experienced that problem. And it sounds as simple as this.
Okay. Can you give me an example of where you've been facing that recently?
Definitely. Every day.
The prospect says, definitely I can give you an example. It happens all the time. And she actually goes into more detail about a specific real life scenario of where they were facing this problem just this very week. So again, I've gone from getting this prospect to visualize a problem to start to think about and actually share with me an example of that problem in their world. The reason I'm doing this is I'm actually getting her to now imagine this and start to make this more than just a sales call, start to get her to really think about this problem and make it at the forefront of her imagination. I'd be really interested. Put in the comments if you're enjoying this so far, and also if you've started to think of the specific problems that you can be leading with on your own cold calls. I'd love to hear. And if you want to put in the LinkedIn chat, I want you to just pop in maybe a specific problem that you would share with your prospect, and I'll try and give you some feedback on that problem. The C, so we've done OPTI. C in optics stands for clue. Now, when we say clue, what does a clue mean? It means you're hinting to an answer, but you're not giving the answer. And one of the biggest rules in prospecting is it's all about intrigue. It's all about getting the prospect to want to find out more, tempting them to want to find out more. But as soon as you give the answer, you're in trouble. The reason being is that if you start to give the answer and start to just turn this into a product pitch and tell them how you do this, you're going to get hit with product questions and does it do this and does it do that and sounds like we do something like that already, and you've lost control of the cold call. Remember, the objective of the cold call is simply to find people who've got a problem that you might be able to solve. It's not to do a discovery call with them. It's not to take them down a full sales process. It's not to ask them 10,000 questions. Remember, you were an interruption to their day. So when I say clue, it's, again, this sounds very basic stuff, but it's saying if there was a solution to that problem, would you want to find out more? And this is what it sounds like in this call.
But what if you could actually get a genuine insight into what their conversations actually sound like, and even without even having to listen to lots of calls, you could actually get that insight? Would that be helpful?
Sure, yeah.
If there was a way that you could tackle that problem that you're thinking about right now, would you want to find out more? Simple as that. If there was potentially a solution to that, not, hey, we've got the solution for this problem, but if there was a solution for that, would you want to find out more? Again, I'm not asking, would you buy this product? Would you commit to a 2-hour-long demo? Would you just want to talk further? Again, it's clues. It's very selective choice of language here. Which brings me to the S of the optics framework, which is the small ask. I've got my objective of finding someone with a problem that I might be able to solve. The yes is the small ask. I don't want to make a big ask here, because when we make big asks in cold calls, prospects raise the resistance barrier and they push you away. This is just small asks. Do you want to find out more? And this is what my small ask sounds like.
Kathy, listen, I appreciate it's Monday morning. I know you've got things to be getting on with. It sounds like there's something at least worth exploring here. Can I suggest, if you're open to it, we schedule maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes, perhaps on Wednesday this week, just so I can, we can have a bit more of an exploratory conversation. At that point, see if this is something that you want to explore a bit further. Does that sound fair?
That sounds fair.
So just to break down what I said there, I said, it sounds like you want to explore this further. Does it make sense for us to schedule some more time just to talk about this in more detail? Does that sound fair? You know, again, I'm not asking Kathy to make a big commitment to me here. I'm not asking for an hour of a time. I'm asking for 20 to 30 minutes just to talk about this in a bit more detail. Because guess what? I'm an interruption. She has better things to be getting on with in her day. And so when you make these small asks with logical statements like, would it make sense, or does that feel fair? It makes it easier for prospects to nod their head and say, well, yeah, it seems a logical step. It would be almost illogical for me to tell you right now, based on the fact I've shared that I've got this problem and I'm thinking of real life examples that I'm facing this week, is, you know, it would feel illogical to not explore this further. Again, she hasn't said this is her biggest priority. We haven't quantified how big of a problem this is. All we're doing is figuring out that there's something to talk about that is relevant, that speaks to a challenge that you're facing, and all I want to do is talk a bit more. Callum's asking, what's the biggest small ask, asking for a meeting? A meeting sounds like a big ask. I don't know about you. If you ask for a meeting feels like I'm going to be putting at least an hour aside of my calendar. I'm going to be getting into a big sales process. There's going to be a big ask at the end of the meeting. Feels too much. What if your ask was just, can we schedule some more time, 20 to 30 minutes, just to discuss this in more detail, just to explore this further, just to really be sure that there is a good fit here? I think there is. And when you do that, you'll notice that prospects will actually open up more, because prospects don't want to feel like they're committing too much. Remember, this is a cold call. This person didn't even know you existed 3 minutes ago. To suddenly be asking for like an hour of their time with the basic level of detail that we've talked about so far feels like a big ask. So think about those small asks and think about how you can use those to your benefit in getting prospects bought into what you want. So that's the optics framework. As I said, if you feel like what you would like is that this guide, this framework, in a nice document with the different consideration points at each part of the framework, much like I've talked through today, that you can then apply your own company into, then put the word guide in the comments, and then if we get enough demand, then we'll create this and we'll share it with everybody who's popped that in there, and hopefully be a really useful resource. Before I go, I'm happy to answer any questions about challenges with cold calls, questions about the framework I've just walked through there with everybody. Would love to help or answer any more questions out. I think got a question from Tyler, which was, would you still use this opener if a company has already engaged with your business in some way? Perhaps there's something registered on your website. I think it really depends, Tyler, on the level of intent that prospect has chosen. So, for example, if they've came on your website and filled in a form and asked for a callback, it would feel strange to ask for 35 seconds. In my opinion, that's no longer a cold call. You're calling with quite a warm lead in that regard. If they've just, for example, downloaded some content or material, in other words, they haven't necessarily directly asked to be called, then I think that call opener works perfectly. It's just the opener sounds a bit different. So, for example, we have people who will download our resources on our website. They haven't asked for a callback. We'd say, hey, Tyler, Richard from Refract here. Listen, I'm an interruption to you Friday afternoon, and we haven't spoken before, but have you got 35 seconds to explain why I've called? Sure. Yeah. Notice that you downloaded X from our website. Normally, when I see people downloading that content, they're thinking about two key challenges. Think of the content that they've downloaded related back to problems that you solve. Remember, the problems that you solve are absolutely key here. People buy based on problems. They don't buy based on products or services. Another question is, When someone says, "Where did you get my mobile?" What do you say? I say I'm very honest. If I've got it from a data product, I say I got it from X product, and I kind of I just answer the question directly. There's, I'm very honest about it, and oftentimes people don't question it. If they've got a problem, if they don't want me to call, if they don't want me to call them again, if they think I've done the wrong thing by calling their mobile, then that's fair enough. Hang up, move on, find another prospect who does want to talk to you. The other thing I just want to mention about the optics framework is that, again, I think coming back to my point about where people go wrong with cold calls is they attach themselves too much to the outcome of booking a meeting. It's perfectly fine to figure out on that call that someone does not have those problems. Someone may genuinely say, "Rich, none of that sounds like a problem I'm facing." And guess what? That's absolutely fine, because we're kind of tuned in sales to always be fighting the objections. If they say this, you've got to handle the objection. Guess what? Sometimes some prospects just aren't ready for to solve the problem that you're going to solve. They don't have the problems. Maybe they've got all the answers. That's fine. If every prospect you called had the problems that you solve, sales would be easy. And we all know it's not. It's actually good to get no's. Find people who aren't a good fit, who haven't got a problem, so that you know not to call them, and to focus your time and attention on people who do. Chaminda is saying, what is the response framework when dealing with an A-type driver VP of sales that simply says, "Hey, can we get to the point?" Or, "What are you selling quickly, please?" This is a good question, because sometimes people say, "Just tell me what this is about." Now, the easy thing to do there, Chaminda, is to suddenly talk about your product. That's the easy thing to do. But I'm going to say again, resist talking about the product as much as possible. When people say, "Can you get to the point? What does you do?" Oftentimes what that really means is, "Can you just help me understand this a bit better?" Maybe what you said the first time around didn't really help. And so what I found works well here is using a bit of storytelling. So if that happens on with my calls, "Sorry, Richard, can you just get the point? What is it you sell?" I'll say, "Yeah, let me position it this way, Mr. Prospect. Do you know that challenge when you feel like you've got a mountain of call recordings of conversations that your sales team are having, but you don't really know where to start listening in those calls? We provide the solution that lets you know which calls you should be paying attention to." Again, you're not talking about your features and benefits. You're just reframing the conversation, positioning things like, "Do you know that situation when?" Or, "Have you ever experienced X?" Or, "Does this sound familiar?" Again, people, I think as soon as you start talking about your products, unless people push you for it, it often leads in objections. Sometimes it just needs reframing the problems in a different way, and often storytelling can really help with that. Asa, you say, "Do you have a standard approach for objection handling?" I'm gonna leave objection handling for another LinkedIn Live. I think there's whole other videos we can do on that, on what to say when we get certain objections. So we'll leave that for now. But I think we've covered enough on this session. Appreciate it was a bit rusty, technical difficulties in the start. But hopefully we learn for next time. This was always going to be a bit hit or miss, given it was the first one of these that we've done. But I've enjoyed this. It's been great to see so much engagement on here, and would love to hear any suggestions that you've got. Objection handling, even specific objections, and pop that in the comments, and maybe we can do specific LinkedIn Lives looking at specific objections, and really get super tactical and specific, and be helpful. So for now, thanks very much all. Been a pleasure. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and weekend.